Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp and to another episode of our Battle in the Backlog series. In this series I go through my quite substantial backlog and try to tick off 6 games, recalling my experiences with the game, giving you a mini review of sorts and ultimately letting you know whether I think it's worth your time and money. So which games have I completed recently and ultimately were they worth it? Well, let's find out. So the first game I completed then was a game called Sunshine Manor. Now this is a top-down adventure game with a pixel art style, has a vibe of some of the old point and click games, especially things like Maniac Mansion. You play as a young girl who on Halloween is dared by her friends to go into a house with quite a checkered past. The man that owned it is rumoured to have killed his son, and before long your friends have been kidnapped and you are left alone trying to escape. Now as you go along you'll meet ghosts and they will ask you to find or do something for them, at which point you'll be pulled into like a demon world where you'll need to carry out said task. Doing so will release the ghost and obviously then you move on. It wasn't a very long game, it took me about 2.5 hours to finish, but I did enjoy my time with it. I liked the overall premise and it did mix things up towards the end, even though it was a short run time, with a couple of the bosses, shall we say, taking slightly different forms in terms of what you had to do. And ultimately, if you can find this one on sale for a cheap price for a couple of hours, 2-3 hours worth of gameplay, if you like your horror settings as well, I would say that you could have a good time with it. The next game I finished was a game called One Night Burlesque. Now this one again only took about 1.5 hours and that does factor in 2 playthroughs, but the basic story is that you are a dancer in a burlesque show who has a special psychic ability, and one night whilst on stage she starts to have premonitions of her best friend being murdered in the last show of that night. This means she has about 3 hours or 3 more acts on stage before the killing will take place if the premonition was correct, and she must speak to some of the patrons of the bar to try and solve the murder before it happens. In terms of how this translates into gameplay, you'll basically speak to a number of different people as each of the acts goes on, asking them a certain amount of questions and obviously getting answers that will get you closer towards who may be the culprit, but you can also use your psychic ability at times to try and wean information out of them. Knowing when to use this during a conversation or whether to use it at all will affect the answers you get, and there are 3, I believe, different endings that you can achieve. I got one of the not so good endings, shall we say, first time round, so played through it again. Speed ran through it the second time, hence why it only took 1.5 hours for 2 playthroughs, and got the better ending second time round. I did enjoy my time with this one. Again, it's one of those games if you can find it for cheap, and it does go on deep sales. It was on a deep sale as soon as it released. Then it's a decent way to spend an hour or a couple of hours if you're looking for something a bit slower paced. Now it was a one-person team that created this game, and I will say there are some grammatical errors, some errors in translation, that sort of thing, so you just I suppose need to accept it's a bit rough around the edges, but I did enjoy the premise certainly, and the execution wasn't too bad either. Next was a bigger game, one that I was working on in between those smaller games, and this was Pikmin 4. Now I finished this game off, completed the story in about 20 hours, I was playing it with my wife, and we finished, 100% finished the whole thing in about, I would say 40-45 hours I guess. Now I'm a big fan of the Pikmin series, have been ever since the first game released on the GameCube, however many years ago now that is, about 20 odd, and this 4th entry in the series I would say is almost objectively the best. The reason I can't say that with complete certainty was because I really enjoyed the co-op aspect of Pikmin 3. Being able to have separate parties and going out on your own runs, getting the bits you needed together was a great deal of fun, and I really enjoyed that aspect of Pikmin 3 when playing it on the Switch. This time round the multiplayer doesn't work that way, so my wife and I kind of took a day each, getting as many bits as we could before passing the controller along. And to be fair, we still had a great time doing this. I do just lament the loss of that proper co-op experience. This one makes some great additions to the series though, and if there ever is a Pikmin 5, if they could try and merge the best bits of 3 and 4, we could have a cracking game, that's for sure. And I actually looked on the playtime of this on the Switch the other day, and it's actually up to 70 odd hours now, so my wife has been playing it since we 100%ed it. I don't know what she's finding to do because we did everything you had to do, but yeah, she's managed to plough another 35 hours into it since then, so yeah, fantastic game, well worth buying. The fourth game was called Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest. Now this one took me about 3.5 hours to finish, and I would say that 3 of the 4 games I've mentioned so far I almost completed by accident, if you know what I mean. Not that you ever don't intend to try and finish a game, but they were games where I kind of picked them up and played them because they had an interesting theme or some description, and before I knew it they were finished, and I almost didn't expect to complete as many games as I did that quick. This is a choose your own adventure style game. It's based on the Werewolf the Apocalypse franchise, which is a part of the World of Darkness theme, also incorporates things like Vampire the Masquerade, and it is a world I really do enjoy dipping into. This one sees you play as a character who is travelling back to Poland, I believe it was, where her family were originally from. She brings a friend with her and they kind of get embroiled in an activist group's bid to try and save the forest from having some trees cut down. Now every person you speak to, you'll have dialogue options, or sometimes it could be that you choose where you want to go for the day, and this will affect how the story plays out, but it's effectively about the young lady finding out about her roots and obviously a more sinister side to her family than she knew existed. It's quite an interesting story. It did lose me a few times in places. It's not quite the out and out werewolf game you might expect, although you do get there in the end, if you know what I mean. But it does have an interesting art style, uses real life locations, which I always enjoy in games, and ultimately at 3.5 hours I felt that I got my money's worth from it. Whether you buy it on sale or whether you buy it at full price really depends on how much stamina you have to go back and replay games such as these, with the purpose of choosing different dialogue options and seeing what would have changed, and there are a few different endings obviously that you can uncover as a result of that. On the whole, I did enjoy it, but it's not as clear a story as some of the other games in a similar genre that I've played. It did lose me a couple of times in places, as I said. The fifth game I completed during this period was Super Mario RPG. Now this was for review, a review that you can watch. There'll be a card in the top right hand corner if you want to see the full story. But this is a game I'd wanted to play for a long time. I remember looking at screenshots in Super Nintendo magazines back in the day thinking it looked amazing, but it never actually released in Europe. Now it's had releases since then on things such as the Virtual Console, even the mini Super Nintendo that they made a few years back, but I was very intrigued to see how this remake would play, and it is a lovely game to play. I really enjoyed my time with it. Now a lot of the mechanics that it uses you would have seen since, obviously the game itself is almost 30 years old by this point, but it has a really nice simplicity to it that makes it a very fun game to play, and an RPG that doesn't outstay its welcome. I think it took me about 11.5 hours to finish, give or take, and for me this felt absolutely spot on. I'm sure it could have extended some of its sequences, had a Bowser fight in there because Mario and Bowser turn on each other all of a sudden, you know, that sort of thing. It's just not necessary. The game does everything it does very well, and it ended at the perfect time as far as I'm concerned. There have been some quality of life changes as far as I understand since the original, bearing in mind, like I said, I never played it. The autosave function being the biggest one, you don't have to use the save stations now, and there are some changes and tweaks in the battle in itself, ways that you can deal damage, that sort of thing. Plus there is some post-game content which I won't go into details about, but if you are wondering if there's anything else to do after, there is a small amount. A fantastic game, I really enjoyed this one, lovely to play. I would highly recommend it, maybe wait for the physical to come down a little bit in price, but yeah, really good game. And the final game then for this video was Borderlands Game of the Year Edition. Now Mark and I usually play a game when we meet up on a Friday night, and a few of those games have made their way into these lists as we finished them off, Remnant being one, Zombie Army 4 was another, and this Borderlands was the most recent. So this of course is a first person shooter with an RPG element to it in some respects, in terms of the fact that you'll level up as you play, you'll gain proficiencies with certain weapons, you can find new weapons in crates that you can then take on, some you can't use until you reach a certain level, you can sell them of course, you can find other bits that help you. There's a skill tree there as well that will help tweak your character as you see fit, and there are different character classes at the beginning. It's also quite an open first-person shooter for those that have never played it before, in terms of you having an open world that you can explore, you'll have certain counters that you can get missions from, and from that you can pretty much make your way and do as you please. It took about 23 hours I would say to finish the game. We did do a few side missions and whatnot too. I did feel that the game started to run out of steam a little bit by the end. You get sent to the same areas quite a lot of quite similar missions. The story wasn't really holding my attention, not that it needed to, I don't really care about story in a first person shooter for the most part, but it did feel like it was starting to outstay its welcome a little bit, and the final boss for me was a bit anticlimactic I must say. Having said all that, I have heard that the second Borderlands game is better, some refinements made I've heard, so I'd be interested in giving that one a play. Now this one I did buy on discount on the eShop, I think it's the Legendary Collection, but the price I've included is just for this one individual game, and this is a game that goes on sale pretty often on the eShop. If you're looking to pick it up, just bear that in mind. And there is a physical collection too, which when you can find it is relatively cheap, but it's getting harder to find, and I think a couple of the games on there are downloads. Not download codes, so that's something, but you do still have to download them. But yeah, enjoyed this one. Could have done with a little fat being trimmed off for me, but still a good time, certainly on a Friday night with a mate. So there you have it, another 6 games finished and off the backlog. Bit of a strange month this one, because as I mentioned in the video, some of these games I wasn't even really looking to complete, I was just playing them for whatever reason. Games that I'd picked up on sale and thought I'd finally try out, that sort of thing, and before I knew it I'd actually finished some of them. But yeah, some big games in there too. Let me know of anything you've completed in this time, were they worth it? Please do tell us all about it in the comments section. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick any of these games up, or anything else of course for that matter, you can use our website switchup.gg to get your eShop cards. Doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back in cash back through our SwitchUp tokens, and you can also use the code SwitchUp to get a further 5% straight discount off of that price. There's also a link down there to Play Asia if you're looking to import any games. Use the link below, use the code stated, and you'll get yourself 5% off of your order from there. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.